Marco Rubio, the mastermind against Trump's position within Venezuela. Today, we are going to discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
Well, today we're going to talk about a little bit, I think he's the individual quarterbacking the situation right now on the White House regarding Venezuela, and is the Secretary of State and also National Security Advisor Marco Rubio. Now, why Rubio is doing this? Why he's pushing Trump with this particular position towards Venezuela against Maduro? And well, the first thing I have to say is I think Trump himself it has this similar bias, and he flat out openly have said this many times since his first administration. He wants to end with Maduro. He said one time on the State of the Union, on his first administration, he said that he wants to squash Maduro like a bug. He said it himself. So this is not a rumor. This is not an opinion. Now the situation with Marco Rubio takes it, so up it up a notch. And first, let's discuss a little bit of who is Marco Rubio. We know that Rubio, he is the descendant of Cuban migrants that escaped Cuba because of the terrible situation they had first, a dictatorship under Batista that was kind of friendly with the U.S. actually, and the economy was kind of, but it was a dictatorship. So, and then we had the Castro regime that destroyed the whole economy, with a socialist, particular hardcore socialist mindset. And well, Marco Rubio, of course, grew up in South Florida, like most of the Cuban exiles and the Cuban descendants, and heard about throughout, his childhood and growing up, all of the horror stories that you hear in Miami, from the exile of the, everything that is going on in Cuba, like, the Bay of Pigs, false flag event, also the Mariel Exodus. That was awful, actually. The movie Scarface, another mafia boss movie, talks about it. Tony Montana came from the exile, the exile of Mariel, and all of the things that the Castro regime does in Cuba and has been horrific. And we know that the closest international relationship between from Cuba is actually with the Venezuelan government, or with first with Chavez and now with Maduro. So basically, Rubio decided, throughout his childhood and growing up, becoming a man, so he wants to do something about it. And how? He became a politician, very conservative, from the Republican Party, in order to do something about it. And he paid his dues, climb up the ladder, started with local legislature. He was part of that. Then he became a U.S. senator. He was the protege of John Ellis Bush, aka Jeb Bush, W. Bush younger brother. He was part of the Tea Party back then. He was considered a quote unquote neocon, or a neoconservative. And right now is, America First, MAGA, since basically Trump entered the scene like almost a decade ago. So that's basically Rubio's resume. He has a very draconian, hawkish position against regimes all over the world, like China, like Iran, like even with Russia. But of course, he softened his position since became the state secretary. To favor Trump, but still, somehow hawkish regarding the situation. And basically, what Trump, many people, I'm hearing a lot of critique about what Marco Rubio is and what Marco Rubio isn't. For the the MAGA America First crowd, Rubio is seen as a neocon, and actually, I don't think it's the case. I think he packed it, and also he, for, of course, he's pro-Israel. Forget that. I think basically he's paying his dues because Rubio is not particularly a leader. He's a server, a public server, and also server to, other, big time politicians. It was with Jeff Bush first, then with the Tea Party, and also with all the elder Cuban American politicians in Florida, and now with Trump, because he wants he wants to to make a dent on this particular situation on both Cuba and Venezuela. And the thing that he found, is now helping Trump is the best way that I can, no, the best way that the Rubio can do something about it. And actually, right now is closest thanks to his political relationship with Trump. You wanna call it? He is actually, he reached the farthest. He is the state secretary, and also he is the national security advisor. He is only the second man of occupying both positions at the same time since Henry Kissinger. Yeah, yeah, that Kissinger. Well, now, on the first period of Trump, the first administration of Trump, Rubio was, of course, he was the senator of Florida, but he had like an, let's say, unofficial advisor position for foreign affairs on the Trump administration. Also, we have to remember that on the Senate, he was on the Senate committee regarding foreign affairs. And also, Rubio, he was part of the what is known in Congress as the Gang of Eight. Eight members of Congress, both senators and representatives from both parties that have access to classified information, and Rubio had granted access on that. And now, of course, he has every access to the intel of the United States, thanks to both titles that he has right now. Now, on the first term, he was very bullish regarding the situation in Venezuela. I remember in 2017, that was Trump's first year in office on his first term. At the same time, it was probably the most traumatic year regarding the situation in Venezuela. Hyperinflation, an exodus of the country, mass protests that lasted like 5 months. People got killed and tortured and things like that. So it was draconian 2017 regarding Venezuela. And of course, Rubio, similar to situations had happened before that within Venezuela. And Rubio, how he was always keeping an eye on the situation and also informing Congress and briefing Congress about the situation. However, on that year, he was, locked in, and Trump got involved. Also, we have to talk about that Trump has some sort of he has a soft side for Venezuela and Venezuelan people. You know that Trump has his golf course, and part of his business is based on Doral, Florida. Doral, half of the population in Doral, Florida, they are actually Venezuelans. And even one of the mayors, former mayor of Doral, was born and raised Venezuelan. Kind of like Mandami, but for the other side, something like that. Okay. And well, and it's fairly small Doral, so it's not like NYC. Anyway, well, Trump knows very well. Also, Trump used to run the Miss Universe pageant that that Venezuela is very well known for that. Is the most one of the most winning countries, more awarded countries regarding beauty pageants in the world. Trump had a participation also on his show, The Apprentice. He had a handful of Venezuelan participants over there. So he knows Venezuela. He knows the old school Venezuela and the connections with Miami, and how Venezuela was the richest country in Latin America and now is one of the poorest, and yada yada yada. He knows play by play the situation. So Trump has a soft spot for Venezuela and also has a soft spot for oil, like liquid gold, like he likes to call it. And so this is not just Marco Rubio, it's Trump himself. So this is a tandem. What I think it happened, the election of Marco Rubio on both of these positions, is that I think this is just a hunch that I have. I think he wants to do something about it. He almost did it on the first time when he recognized Guaido and the fiasco with John Bolton and things like that. But I think this time he's more serious about it, and every action that Trump has taken is pushing that direction. I mean, metaphorically and also very directly, so very realistically. And I think he appointed Marco Rubio because he wants to blame someone if this thing doesn't go well. And actually, Trump himself said it on Congress that, hey Marco, hey little Marco, if this thing doesn't work, we are gonna blame you. Yeah, you know how it is. So I think is that also Marco Rubio understands very well what is going on in Venezuela. But I mean, very well, he knows every detail, he knows every actor involved. He tweets a lot. Even he had feuds with several people of Maduro's, top brass government. He has feuds, threatened them to put him in jail or even kill them. And actually, this is another report, allegedly, but apparently it's true, that Marco Rubio suffered an attempt against his life. Uh, Apparently, it was like a plan in order to attempt with Marco Rubio's life in 2017, and afterwards his security detail, the Secret Service, and things like that, it was tripled according to the news. I don't know if that's true or not, but for most positions, the open source says that is actually true. I don't know. So he also has that particular personal side in order to see this come to fruition. Now, what Marco Rubio can and what Marco Rubio can do regarding the situation in Venezuela, well, he can suggest now he has both of the critical positions. He's the Secretary of State, so he's the policymaker for the foreign affairs and interests of the United States, and also he is the National Security Advisor, so he controls the National Security Council, intelligence, information, yada yada, and designs the policy regarding national security. So you combine those, unlike, for instance, the past administration that you had Anthony Blinken as the Secretary of State with Biden, and also you had Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. If you ask me, I kind of like Blinken, and Sullivan was horrific, especially with the policy of Venezuela. The whole National Security Council under Biden was horrible regarding the situation of Venezuela. Everyone, and when I say everyone, remember Gary Oldman in The Professional? What do you mean by everyone? Well, that's how horrible it was, especially the guys assigned for Venezuela, including Sullivan himself. Well, anyway, now you had Blinken. Blinken is very close to Biden, as far as I can tell. I mean, his political career and yada yada yada. Not so much with Sullivan. So apparently, it was this gridlock between uh, between between Blinken, I'm sorry, and Sullivan, and they had different. For instance, that happened a lot in Ukraine, and as far as I know, I have spoken with Ukrainians, and they tell me that they like Blinken and they hate Sullivan. Regarding, because right now the narrative is that Biden give a bunch of money and things like that to Zelensky. But in play by play, I remember those days when the war started. It was like a back and forth. Okay, we're gonna give you this, but we're gonna give you like in 6 months. Let me see, yada yada. It was a back and forth. But at the end of the day, of course, Biden was very generous with Zelensky and Ukraine. And you might like it, might not like it, but that's what happened. Okay, well, the one that was, let's go help these people, as far as I can tell, it was Blinken, and the one holding out, it was actually Sullivan on the National Security Council. Today, we have Rubio on both sides of the argument. So he's on the State Department on the National Security Council. So it's basically flowing the situation of the policymakers on both arenas. And even before he was appointed as National Security Advisor, his predecessor was Mike Waltz, a former congressman from Florida, on a very similar hawkish position in Venezuela. Right now, Mr. Waltz is the U.S. ambassador for the United Nations, so a similar position, not as important, but yeah, he's chipping in from his side. Anyways, now, what I think, at the end of the day, you have the gridlock after you don't have the gridlock of both the State Department and the NSC, but everything comes with Trump. And Trump is not, let's say, an absentee manager like Biden, call it spade by spade, regardless on your political bias. And but he's putting every option on the table. And I think Trump is a very pragmatic businessman and also, kind of like a showman. He cares a lot about, the perception on how things are going. So I think Rubio is basically just putting some options. Of course, there are other people involved, like Stephen Miller, also the General Racing Kane. He is very involved on this, and a handful of others on the administration. But at the end of the day, it's Rubio. Rubio is the guy, and actually Maduro himself always is blaming Rubio with the situation. Of course, it gets with Rubio on the mix, the situation gets extra hawkish, extra explosive. But at the end of the day, Trump is going to make the decision. So he is the mastermind, could be the architect of the policies and the options. But at the end of the day, it's Trump all the way. Trump will make the decision. I think he already made the decision. And right now, what we're seeing is the unraveling of the strategy, if you ask me. So, well, that will be all for today. Thank you for your attention, and we'll see each other on the next video.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, venezuelainsider.com. Thanks again and have a nice day.